Hi guys. So this episode is going to be a little different. I get a lot of questions about Webtoons, webtoons.com, which is where I'm posting Sithra now. And it's a South Korean website where anyone can post a webcomic, and it has kind of a nice endless scrolling format. And they have a lot of featured artists that they pay a monthly salary to be a featured artist, and I'm one of their featured artists. And so a lot of people ask me, should I do that? Is this good or bad? And I mean, for me, it's great. I mean, it's solved a lot of my problems. It's paying for the production of my book, and I can go to Kickstarter later and print the books and sell them, and I retain all the physical rights. They keep the digital rights, worldwide digital rights, for it's like 2 or 3 years, depending on the contracts you sign. But that, to me, is a very little thing to trade for being paid a salary to actually produce the content. And so, for me, it's a dream come true. It meant I had to change my immediate plans a little bit, but if anything, it's only helped fast track me getting more books done. So anyway, what I did this episode is there was 3 other guys on Webtoons that either signed on before me, or one of them was signing on right at the same time I was. And I was calling them up and asking them all kinds of questions like, should I join Webtoons? And what's this site all about? Well, anyway, I figured I'll just get these guys all on the horn, and I'll have them introduce themselves, and we'll all discuss Webtoons and see how it's been working out for us. And so hopefully this will open your guys' eyes to a little bit more about Webtoons and how it works and how there's different approaches to it. Anyway, so that's it. Enjoy the show. Cue audience. Cut. I said cut. Hello, this is Jason Brubaker. I'm the creator of Remind, and now Sithra is my full-time comic I'm working on. Just this last year, I moved out of LA, quit the industry of Hollywood, and moved to Idaho, and I've been working on comics full-time. It's been a real dream come true. So I decided to start this new podcast called Coffee Table Comics Podcast. And it's going to be a round table where I just bring in some amazingly talented artists that blow my mind, that I'm jealous of, and I just want to ask them all kinds of questions and pick their brains as to what they're learning and what they're figuring out, because this industry is crazy and it's changing every day. Anyway, let's see where this goes.
I'm Josh Ulrich, and my comic on Webtoons is Newman. It's sort of a comedy, action, fantasy, romance. I also do a comic called Jackie Rose, which I'm going to be bringing to Webtoons, not on a featured level, but I'm going to be bringing it back there pretty soon.
So you're going to do both of them at the same time, or is that next?
Yeah, I'm going to try to do both of them at the same time. I've got a lot of Jackie Rose already done, so I'm just going to start running it on Webtoons and see what kind of audience it gains. But I'm going to attempt to do it at least at a slow pace to keep it moving.
Well, I love Jackie Rose, so
he's going to start it in the Challenge League.
Oh, okay.
And then try to get it promoted to like a featured. Like, that's what I'm hoping for, at least.
Steven's always
I'm like,
voting
oh
for
man,
that.
Jackie Rose is the best.
But yeah, that's me.
Good. Oh, and Josh also helped me color Sithra 1. He did a lot of the coloring work on that too.
This is also true.
So that's where I met Josh. All right, how about you, Michael?
I do a comic called Adamsville. It's sort of like a Goonies meets the X-Files. So kids who get caught up in a big mystery conspiracy with monsters and secret organizations and all that kind of cool stuff.
It's a book that you did as a graphic novel before you put it on Webtoons, right?
Yeah, it was. I published the first volume independently, and then I was in the middle of making the second one when they approached me about it becoming a featured comic on Webtoons.
Okay. And did you put it through the Challenge League? Is that how you got it?
Yeah, I had started putting it on the Challenge League when they were running their first contest after Steven kind of told us about it, but because of some of the way the rules were stipulated, I kind of decided like I wasn't putting my effort into it the way I should have been, and I stepped away. But then after the contest was over, I just kept posting. I decided, and then I kind of learned about really what the featured artist deal was and how that all worked. I decided to start posting it once a week, just a big chunk of content. And then after doing that for about 6 weeks, they wrote me and asked me if I'd like to come on to featured.
That's cool.
So I kind of was a post first contest person they pulled out of the challenge.
Okay. And go back to you, Josh. How did you get approached by Webtoons?
I had both my comics in the Challenge League during the contest because Steven was pushing us towards that. But kind of like Mike, I didn't take the contest super seriously because contests traditionally are sketchy and terrifying in the American comics world. And so I just I had some stuff on there. I wasn't posting super frequently, but then the day that the winners were announced, they contacted me and said, hey, you had your stuff on some other websites, so we couldn't consider you for a winner, but we want to feature you. And then it was all history from there. So I joined in pretty much within a week after the contest or so. We were negotiating contract and all that stuff.
Oh, okay.
And like to piggyback on that, like I literally, Josh calls me, tells me what the web featured thing is. We're at lunch together, and I was like, maybe I should take this more seriously. not thinking that I'd actually really have a chance at that point, but I was like, well, I've got this book that's done. I might as well just see what happens.
Yeah.
And so then it thankfully they came around, they liked it.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, and then you, Steven, it sounds like you're kind of the spearhead of this. You're pushing these guys to do it.
My name's Steven McCraine, and I make comics, and I found the first contest that Webtoons was running, and what made me notice it was just the amount of money. It was really weird how much money they were offering, and I was like, what kind of illegal thing is going on here? Like, what type of, do they make you a slave when you become part of the contest? Or I didn't understand it, so I did some research and then discovered that there's been an incredible webcomics renaissance over in South Korea, and that they're trying to replicate their model here in America. And I was like, wow, this is ground zero. This is like if YouTube was trying to start something, and I could get in early. And I also discovered that since I was in a really rare position where I would have a relatively big advantage because I didn't see many professional cartoonists taking the contest seriously. So I felt like, so I created a challenge for myself. I decided at the worst, if I lost, I would have almost half a graphic novel done, and if I won, it would be an amazing thing. So I just took 2 months off because I had it, and just drew as much comics as I could, and I created a comic called Space Boy, which I'm super proud of, and ended up winning the contest, and been working with Webtoons ever since.
That's great. And before that, you did a comic called Mal and Chad, right?
Yeah.
Which was by
Philomel Books, which is a imprint of Penguin Young Readers Group.
Penguin, okay, yeah. Well, cool. Well, thanks you guys for coming on. This is going to be a fun conversation, I think. And I talked to all you guys before I joined because they emailed me out of the blue, and I couldn't figure them out at all. I was like you, Steven. I was just like, wait, what is going on here? Like, this doesn't make sense. And they were just saying, yeah, we'll pay you. And I'm like, yeah, right. Everyone promises stuff, and they say, come on, join my website, and then we'll give you something really cool. And then you go there, and they want you to do all kinds of work, and it's for free in hopes that something will happen. And so I just kept kind of going back and forth with them. And then my contact got sick, and so she kind of stopped communicating with me. And then I was like, well, I guess that's it. I guess this isn't happening. And then another guy took over and started talking to me. And this is after I talked to a lawyer and had him look at an IP lawyer, look at the contract. And he was like, yeah, it looks pretty good other than these couple things. So I addressed that, talked to them about that, and I still wasn't convinced really. And this is before I was packing up to move here to Idaho. And so I was like, well, I don't know if that money will pay my bills, I don't know how much, and so we kept going back and forth, and finally I went and met with them at their place in Los Angeles the day before I was leaving. Met the whole team of people, and we all went out to lunch, and that really sold me. It just convinced me, like, okay, this is a real company. Right. And they're basically just putting all kinds of seed money into trying to get this English speaking site version of their South Korean site up and running. And I was like, okay, it makes sense. They have a long-term strategy to try to get it up and running.
I was going to say, meeting them, we met all of them at Stephen had met them before, but we flew up to New York City Comic Con and met all of them up at there, or met at least David and a few others of them, like some of the people who work in the company, including the CEO was there. So we had Ken, who runs the American side, and we met him and a bunch of the other people from it was really cool. And like, we left and it was just like, okay, they're for real.
Yeah, it's real. They love comics. These are amazing people.
That's how I was. I was like, as soon as I walked out of there, I was like, okay, sold. Yeah, it's done. Like, I just need to like start getting my, butt in gear as to how I'm going to get this content done now. Mm-hmm. And I think that's been the most challenging thing for me, is just the demand. And I compare it to webcomics. So webcomics, you put up a page or two a day, and your fans are like, wow, this is great. You're giving us lots of content. And then on Webtoons, you put up I'm putting up 10 or 20 pages.
Too small. It's too small.
Of stuff. It's spread out, and the most common comments are, this is too short.
Yep.
And I give you the equivalent of an issue of a comic in American floppy form over the course of a month, and you're complaining. What is wrong?
Yeah, I don't get it. The first 3.5 months, I did a 150-page graphic novel, okay? And that's Sithra number 2. And I've been just churning this stuff out, and that's incredible. I'm thinking, this is awesome. But on Webtoons, it's like, wait, you're not giving us anything. And I'm like, dude, this is such a contrast. But
what was it Steven said? Steven made blankets. He wasn't.
Oh yeah, in 8 months.
He made blankets in 8 months.
Oh yeah, I think I
a book as big as blankets.
I'm past the 500 page mark right now, and it's the fastest I've ever drawn anything. But it's weird too, because I don't know if it's, for me, I don't know if it's ever going to be an actual print book, because this is something entirely different. And it's all full color. And so if I really am going to make this as a print book, I need to have a pretty big demand, because no one's going to buy a 500 page full color for, it would probably be a $50 book. Is this ever going to see print? Or is this just
they do make smaller books, Stephen?
I know.
You don't have to.
Even then, it's do I ask my audience to buy 3 smaller color graphic novels for $15 a piece?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm asking my audience to buy 6
there you go.
To complete my story. So.
Well, I mean, I look at it very, especially with a book, and I don't know if we're getting off the topic of what the direction we wanted to go.
No, there's no topic.
Okay. I didn't know the direction. But I look at it and I was actually trying to explain this to the Webtoons folks, that I view what I'm doing with them as being very different from what I'm trying to do with my print books, because I create a very all ages friendly comic that I think of, I really feel like I'm creating something as if I were a part of Scholastic's imprint or something, where that's my aim, you know what I mean? And that audience is not typically a web-based audience. And so most of the success I'm finding with Adamsville from a book sales perspective is from school visits, from comic shows, and it's generating a much different audience there than it's generating on the internet. And I view that it's kind of we're playing 2 strategies here. It's building a completely different type of audience base.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm curious, if my Webtoons audience is really going to translate to very much beyond, having Sithra on Webtoons. I know there's probably a really small fraction of a percent or something, that will actually buy the book from who discovered me on Webtoons. To me, it's just like you're saying, it's a completely different thing. My strategy has always been make the books, build up this library of books that I can sell and create passive income from that. And then Webtoons came and said, here's money to give us content. And so suddenly now Webtoons is paying me to make the books, to actually produce the content. And then but I'm producing it still in book form. And then I have a guy who's converting it all to the Webtoons format. So my end goal is still the books. They're just kind of the people giving me the money to make those books,
Right.
Because I still think, and I'm just not convinced that Webtoons is going to keep paying. It's going to translate to a lot of sales from that audience.
I can speak a little bit to that, and Josh can too, because we've run Kickstarters off the books, both of our books from there. And my experience so far has been that it does not translate very well. I mean, I've been given preliminary numbers on what Adamsville does on the readership on Webtoons, and compared to the number of people who I had back my Kickstarter, was a very most of the people who backed my Kickstarter were people who backed it the first time, and a smaller percentage came over, either found it on Webtoons, and I'm sure there's a few people from Webtoons that did read it, but not a whole, not based on the number of people that were involved. It could have been much more bonkers, and that wasn't what happened. Yeah.
I had a decent amount of people from Webtoons, I feel like, jumped in, but another thing to keep in mind is that even though we're being exposed by being featured artists in Webtoons, you're thrust into a very large pool, a big audience that I've never had an audience that big before. But that said, even though there's a lot of more people reading it now, they're not true fans yet. I mean, most people that have audiences our size have been posting their comics online for years and years, and they've built that over a really long time, and now they have dedicated fans. And so I feel like we still have to earn that. Just because the numbers are there, it doesn't mean the sales are there just yet.
Yeah.
And I'll agree with that 100%. It's not that I don't think I have. It's just I think I'm still developing that audience there. Whereas I earned it with the people who had backed it the first time, because they bought it the first time, they liked it, they invested in helping it made, they were ready for it to, those who backed it again were ready to help the second one come out.
Now, I've never asked them about the numbers in it on the American side of things. I mean, I've seen some of the stats for the Korean side, but I don't know, are the numbers, like how many people actually see your comics weekly when they update? Do you know?
I don't know if we're allowed to say yet.
Yeah.
It's top secret.
Yeah.
Webtoons.
It's confidential at the moment.
Yeah, you might be able to ask your editor directly, and they'll tell you. But it seems like that's something they're kind of wanting to wait on. But
we can talk about it offline.
Yeah, we can talk in a different junction. We can talk in a different context. Okay. But it's way more than I've ever had before. Way more.
Another thing to consider is that they're launching an English-speaking website, but it's still the global website. And I'm just looking on. I don't know how accurate this analytics. I'm looking at Webtoons right now through an analytics website, and I don't know how accurate this is. But one of the things I have been a little concerned about is that it says here that 22% of the people who visit the website are from the United States, and everybody else is outside of the United States.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. So we're not reaching our usual English-speaking audience. And if you offer someone a book, it's like, I don't know, if you offer someone sales, it's going to be really hard to get someone to buy something when they have to pay $25 for shipping.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. That's interesting.
This business model lives or dies on advertising and on money that can be made online through clicks. I don't know. It's a very separate thing. I want it to work because when I see what it's doing in South Korea, that causes me to think man, that's a really good living. When you're having 100,000 clicks, which converts to, it's like YouTube, the amount of money that you can make on YouTube. I mean, granted, it's only for the select, top of the top, but it's money that I never thought would be even possible to make with comics, and that's what makes me excited and makes me really want it to work. So,
and I mean, and I really like the company. I really like them. I like what they're trying to do. I want it to succeed because I think they really want to bring something special to the American marketplace that's never happened before. And I mean, and the readers benefit. It's all free to them.
Yeah.
It's
totally.
I mean, at least at this phase. And so it's if we can pay creators to be able to make the content and and still be able to provide it for free to our readers. I mean, it's a win-win for everybody. I don't know what the ultimate end goal is, but it's kind of an amazing deal.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Have you guys ever heard of any other company that's similar to it? I know there's some of these other groups of webcomics, like, what is it, Hiveworks? Like stuff like that.
There's Spottoon and Tapastic, but they're both South Korean based, but they're not like Webtoons in that they pay their featured artists. Well,
Tapastic is Webtoon?
They're not Webtoons, but they're South Korean.
They are?
Yeah. Tapastic
I don't think I ever knew that.
They're an American branch of a South Korean company, but they have kind of a Patreon system built into theirs. And then Spottoon they're hooked up with like Huffington Post or something. But right now, I don't think they're bringing any American artists on board. They're strictly doing their own Korean artists.
I don't think I ever realized Tapastic was. Never knew that. It's kind of freaking me out a little bit.
I don't remember how. I think Steven told me about that or something. I don't remember how I found out about that.
And I did not, because I always got emails and stuff. It seemed like it was just like a guy who built it or something,
Well, I think it's like Webtoons. I think there's like it's like an American branch of it that is running the whole Treefort operation or whatever they're doing.
Yeah, I've had people ask me, what's the difference between Webtoons and Tapastic? And I'm like, I don't know. I've never used Tapastic, so I don't know.
Tapastic's got a lot of cool stuff in it too.
Yeah, but now I'm looking online and it says that Tapastic partners with a South Korean publisher. So I don't know, but I know it started by South Korean. I don't know, but it came out of the South Korean movement at least.
I've heard of a few others. So like I don't know what the details on it, but I know like that was the thing that Tokyo Pop was doing, right? They're trying their own version of this. Comixology's trying their own version of it. Go Comics has something that they're doing. So it seems like it's becoming a model where they're trying to do this like sort of curated digital content, if I'm understanding all of it correctly. So it definitely seems like it's something that's catching on. I don't know the full business, scope of everything, but I've been seeing it crop up in a few other places too.
Everyone's been saying digital's kind of, this is the future, like once someone figures it out. So
maybe they figured it out.
Yeah,
I hope
they
so.
definitely figured it out in South Korea.
Yeah, they figured it out enough to convince me to completely change my plan of action and go with them. But like you were saying, Michael, I like the company. I like the people there. It's just, everything was just all around really cool, really good vibes, And what's interesting was I saw you three join him. And I was like, well, if all three of them are on it, then it can't be that bad.
Right.
When I was shocked when I saw the contract, because I've had contracts from like bigger companies, and the whole thing in America is like, we're going to give you the worst deal possible, and then you're going to fight for every single right, because our hope is that you're going to miss something, and then we'll get you.
Yeah. And
this is like, we're going to give you the best deal possible because we want to be your friends and develop long-term relationships with you.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like, wait, hold on. Let me look at this a little closer because I don't believe you.
Yeah, it's...
And like, we're putting the creator's needs first. Like, no, that's silly. Everyone puts the creator's needs first. After your paycheck.
It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I'm kind of depending on this to pay my bills now, and I'm thinking, okay, well, Cithra is going to last... At the rate I'm going, because I'm going lightning speed now, I'll get it done in probably the end of 2016. Now suddenly I'm worried, like, well, are they going to take my next comic that I want to do?
I have the same concern because Adamsville was always designed to be I don't know if it was always designed to be exactly 3 books, but when I didn't get a traditional publisher behind it and I knew it was on me, I said I wanted it to end after 3 books because I wanted to be able to move on to another property. And so I had set so many wheels in motion. By the time Webtoons came along, I was like, I can't derail this to try to make it longer, And so I, even talked with them. I said, look, this book will be done the end of 2016, and then maybe we'll talk to you about something else. Like I have concerns about it going forward because I still have my day job. The only reason I'm able to pull Webtoons off with that on top of it is because I was so far ahead by the time that they contacted me I was like, okay, I think at the pace I generally move at, I'll be able to pull this off. But if they had come at me in the first book and said, let's do this, and I would have had to keep my day job, I don't think I could have done it. It would have been too much. And so that poses some issues with me next go around, because I'm like, if I'm still juggling both, I don't think I could step in immediately and have a new webtoon as soon as Adamsville's over. But if I'm in a position where I could, that might be a more realistic option, it would be a different conversation. But those are the things I have to worry about come next fall once I'm finishing up.
Well, at least you have a day job, so that's good.
Yeah.
I'm prepared to make my book into eternity if I have to.
For Newman or Jackie Rose or both?
Well, either one. But I was surprised they jumped on Newman. I had Newman and Jackie Rose both on there, and I was full gung-ho getting ready to just make Jackie Rose, and then they contacted me about wanting Newman, and so I was like, sure, let's do it. And it's a very different type of story that I do with Newman, where it's very much like, it's almost more like a TV show where I do episodes kind of thing, which makes it easy to write, in the long term, because I can just kind of bounce around with different stories and not have to worry on one large, huge arc. But I've had the same thoughts about, like, at some point, it might be nice to switch to Jackie Rose or something else, and how is that going to work? And but I suspect, just with talking with them, like, especially for those of us that already work with them, they've kind of said, if when the time comes you want to do something else, just pitch it to us and talk to us, and we'll work it out and see if something we want to do. Or
I know they brought on some people who finished other projects already, right? There were a few people who finished, and they brought them on to do a second book.
How long is Space Boy planned for, Stephen?
It was made for Webtoons, and I have barely even scratched the surface. That makes me really excited. Yeah, I can see it going for another 2 years or something.
I think Steven's the only one of us Steven is the only one of us that has a comic created specifically for Webtoons. Everybody else, I think, brought something to the table that they were already working on.
It's an idea that I've been sitting on for a long time, and so I think that really helped, having it, like, just been thinking at it from, like, a lot of different angles just for a long time, because now when I have to, like, create in the moment, like, there are themes that have been with me for a while, so it's not like they're unfamiliar and I'm getting into entirely new territory. But it's been hard to write. It's been hard to learn how to write on a schedule like this, and also, like, it's totally contrary to how I would do it if I was making a book for a publisher, because I know kind of how it ends, but I'm not sure how to get there, and I'm kind of charting things out and having to trust that everything's going to work out in the end, which is really new for me. But I think it actually helps the writing significantly, because I have to just rely on the characters to move things forward and not on what I think should happen. And it's been a really great experience.
It's been so new for me too, just to have to, like, produce something and get it done, like a giant amount of pages, and have it all done within, like, 3 months or something.
It's like as close as we're going to get to being a manga artist.
Yeah. Because, with Remind, I was working on that for 7 years before getting it done. So it's a completely different speed. And how's it been for you, Josh? Are you holding up good with this speed of everything? It seems like you're just effortlessly just cranking it out.
It's completely effortless. No stress, no pressure
that's
whatsoever.
That's what it seems like. I'm amazed.
I originally had a pretty big buffer, but of course I wore that out. So now I'm pretty much flying by the seat of my pants. But but it hasn't been too bad. I mean, it's the only work I'm doing right now. So I've kind of gotten it to... I figured out the amount of work that's reasonable that I can get done. And so... yeah, I mean, it hasn't been too bad, but yeah, it is a lot of work.
That's cool. And so you're working on it. You're full time.
Correct.
Right now.
Yeah, I was already full time doing a lot of freelance stuff, and I had kind of been, at the time they approached me, I was sort of dead in the water with freelance work, so it was definitely a godsend. And so yeah, I'll take on a little bit of freelance work on the side if something really good shows up. But for the most part, I'm strictly doing Webtoons, which is what I wanted to be doing. So yeah, I work on Newman, and then in my spare time, I'm trying to get Jackie Rose done as well. But I'm single, so I can do that.
Yeah. That helps. And how about you, Steven? Are you full time on this?
Yeah, I'm full time. It's probably the 40 hour. I've been trying to get it down to 5 days a week, but it keeps popping into 6 days, and
Yeah.
it's pretty all consuming.
Yeah. Well, you do a lot of. Well, you guys all do it. A lot of stuff on your updates compared to mine.
Well, your book's formatted quite a bit differently. You know, the way you present Cithra was always a bit not the a traditional format.
Yeah.
And so it just lends itself to being different, I think, when you execute it,
Yeah.
from a Webtoons perspective.
I thought Cithra looked super pretty in the Webtoons format when I first saw it. Like, wow, that like really flows super nice.
So, side question. I remember when you originally were doing Cithra, you had kind of GIF animations in it.
Oh yeah.
Have you considered using some of their animation software they've been developing, like that they've been using on Psycho KO and Chiller and some of these other webtoons that build some of that stuff back in, or are you moving on from that?
They showed it to me, and they, because I was like, well, I want to put GIFs into these, when I want them, and they said, oh, well, by the time you start, we'll have that feature available. It's a little different, like it's like some kind of proprietary software or site you build it through, and so to me it just felt like a whole lot of extra work on top of just trying to convert it all anyway.
Sure.
And
Right.
and I'm just racing to get the content done, so I kind of just abandoned all that. All the bells and whistles. I'm just trying to get it done now. So
yeah,
but I mean I love having those options, it's just,
oh yeah, goodness,
you would almost have to have someone dedicated to doing that, I think. Like you do the art and then someone else work on the motion side of it.
Right.
I know I think the Psycho guy who does Psycho KO, Robert, I think he does it all himself, and it's pretty ridiculous. Like he's used it certainly the most in some of the most interesting ways I've seen people using that animation software.
Yeah, for me it's time, and I'm not trying to work 12-hour days either. I'm trying to have a normal life, and I'll post less if I have to, so I can have an 8-hour workday.
Well, and we just in talking about the stress of it. Like I can honestly say, like I'm working the hardest right now to finish the second book because of Webtoons and just other general schedule stuff than I've ever worked on anything in my life. And I just feel beat down. And it's kind of been nice, like listening to and I know it's not the same comparison, but listening to like some of my favorite directors, like even J.J. was talking about Star Wars, like I'm just so ready to be done. It's just like, it's stayed around for so long. And just feeling that way too, where I'm like, I'm at the end and I'm just ready to be done. But I'm with you. Like I keep trying to find ways to make it more manageable. Ultimately, it's something I haven't completely ironed out yet. But one of the things that Webtoons does do is they will allow comics to work in more of a seasonal approach, to where you take some months off and you come back in a sort of like, oh, it's the next season of the comic or something, And so those are sort of the discussions I'm having with them, is sort of, what about if we do that, just to make sure that I'm giving myself the time to make sure the story is good, and that I'm not going to have any potential production issues down the line. And then finally ended up hiring some help to help me get the coloring work done too.
So you are hiring someone, or that's something you're going to have to do later on? I've
hired a couple people. So my wife actually does the majority of the flatting on my books now.
Oh, that's cool.
And so she helped. She flatted over 100 pages. She's right next to me, so she's not. She did over 100 pages in book 2, and book 2's 213 pages printed. So she did a ton of work on that. And I've had a few other people that have been with me since the beginning of book 1, and then I've hired 2 separate coloring assistants to kind of help me get the work done. And that's been a challenge because you bring people in who have their own experience and their own skill sets, and I'm asking them to not color like them. They have to mimic me. And it's not because it's like, look, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I've done 150 pages of this book in this style, and if you do anything else, it just screws everything else up. We need to stay on the same page here. And so I brought them in at the end of book 2, so I've got, there's 3 of us coloring the book, trying to bring it to a finish now.
Wow, that's cool.
It's been a challenge. Interesting.
How about you, Stephen? Do you have any people helping you?
I have someone flat every once in a while and help me flat with just getting pages colored, but my process is already like pretty dang streamlined. Like flatting is almost 50% of coloring, like or more, like, and so my flatter took a break for a while, went on vacation or something, and it forced me to go back and like do all the stuff, and I found out a lot of more efficient ways to do it. Like I realized that in Manga Studio, which is what I work in, there's a way to use the fill tool so that it senses the vector lines that I draw with and fills in things really quick. And so I haven't been using my flatter recently, so I've been doing it primarily a lot of times by myself, mostly just to save money and just because I can afford the time. But
yeah.
So lesson learned, flatters: don't ever take time off.
Time off, or I'll It's funny because like when I first started doing it, I was like, Josh, you should be doing this, man. He's like, no, I can't afford that. I don't want to I'd rather just work super hard and keep it for myself. And now I'm in the same boat. Yeah,
I'm cheap.
I'm more like, I've got 3 hours in a day. I get like 3 hours of a day, and that's so any help I can get just makes my life less.
Yeah, I actually reached out to a flatter at one point, and I offered a pretty fair price, but then they came back and was like, I would need more money for what you want, and I just sighed with relief. I was like, oh, thank God. I don't have to hire anybody. I dodged the bullet.
The universe didn't want it to happen.
Yeah, that was my best effort. So I've actually been doing fine since then.
Never again.
Turned out to be okay.
That's cool. Yeah, I have a couple flatters, and I have a guy that when people that are helping me locally are a little behind, I can send like 8 pages or 8 spreads to, and he'll finish them in like a day. Because flatting takes forever. I mean, and my stuff's all like with brush, and so it's on paper.
I've heard of that before. Paper.
I have a feeling. I keep telling people I have a feeling my next book will be all digital, because especially if I'm trying to do it for Webtoons.
Well, they built so much stuff into even the new Manga Studio now that I don't know. I have a hard time even working traditionally anymore, just because you just have all this stuff right there, and so many of even the traditional media, they've got brushes that mimic it really well, and it makes it virtually indistinguishable. And just for production speed and everything, it's like I'd rather have that and just get the pages done.
Yeah, people keep telling me I need to do Manga Studio, and I keep resisting. One day I'll break.
It's great.
I'll give in.
It's great.
I even have it. It's here in a drawer.
It's a new one or the old one? They're on 5 now.
I think it's 4.
4 is the one that I like.
Yeah? Oh.
4 is good too. I've converted over to
4EX
5.
is the one that I still use.
Okay, I've noticed like some mainstream guys coming on nowadays on Webtoons, like Cyberforce, Mark Silvestri's Cyberforce is on there, and then obviously like Star Wars is on there. Like what? Like how did that happen? Right?
That was actually the Korean side got the rights to do that a while ago, and so they went ahead and brought it over from Korea, translated it to Webtoons. Is how that one went down.
Well, that makes more sense because it does look very Korean in the art style.
Because it's Korean.
Because it's Korean,
Yeah, because that's literally what it is.
Are a lot of those just brought over, or is it?
There's a decent little chunk that is brought over. They've been bringing on a lot of American cartoonists. Like most of the top comics, like Girls of the Wilds, God of High School, The Gamer, Noblesse. A lot of that is big Korean comics that were already kind of being pirated here a lot. And so I think they kind of said, well, why don't we just take advantage of this for ourselves and bring these comics over officially?
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, now they seem pretty focused on wanting to build, they want American creators, and they want to build their own thing.
Yeah.
Because I talked with them about, I was talking to the CEO about like getting big name people and stuff, and he was kind of saying like that's not really their big focus is getting big name people. They'd rather create their own big name people and bring in young talent. So
Oh,
that was
how
kind of
interesting.
cool.
Okay. Yeah, and you know, their newest contest, they have Stan Lee's face and name all over it, you know, to try to pull.
Right.
It seems like they're doing a lot of smart things to try to attract people.
I think that if they really want to succeed, they need to make the incentives not money based but platform based, because they're still thinking big business model, which makes sense in South Korea, but I don't know if it makes sense here in North America, because I don't know, unless you're working for Marvel or something, usually most cartoonists don't approach comics in terms of big business models. They think more in small business models. And so most cartoonists in North America are Kickstarter people or Patreon type people who are thinking like, how can I promote myself? What's the quickest way for me to get my work out there? And I think that if they want to reach out to more cartoonists, that they need to build more incentives for that type of crowd. Because, like I said, it worked. Like they're doing a lot of big business type of stuff with contracts and contests and things like that. But if the incentives were inherently built into the platform, then I think that they could reach a lot more people faster.
Now, explain that a little more. Like, for the listeners, they have incentives in the contract. So if you get, I don't know, like a lot of people coming to Webtoons from your Facebook and Twitter and stuff, and then that mixed with the rating and that mixed with how many likes it has and all that stuff, you can get a pay increase in what they pay you. So you're saying more of a platform base, like would be better. Like how exactly are you saying that?
If they want to make something that blows up, I think the problem right now is that you can only hire so many artists. I think it's a problem that a lot of mainstream publishers had before small business self-publishing kind of took off, is that they didn't know exactly who would be the next Harry Potter. So, they have all these like barriers to entry and things like that, but ultimately they just pick a bunch of authors, throw them against the wall and see what sticks. Whereas now they can like look in the indie publishing industry and say, oh wow, that guy's blowing up. Let's help him. Like let's get in there. And so there's like it's an entirely different process, and it actually kind of reveals how inefficient the process used to be, where they would just randomly pick people and hope that they stuck. I feel like if you like kind of use the power of like networking and like especially the new forces of social networking, where you have, rather than a bunch of creators seeking one big prize, you have even more creators seeking a bunch of little prizes, where it's like, hey, I can upload my comic and this will be my home on the internet where I can keep all my fans and like interact with them. And then you have, if you appeal to all those little teeny people, you have more of a chance of finding the big people than just hiring who you think might work, if that makes sense.
I think ultimately the issue is improving the challenge league is kind of what you're driving at, because right now the biggest reason anybody would post their comics in the challenge league is because they want to be featured and they want to get paid. And most of the people that read Webtoons, they read the featured comics and they don't spend a lot of time in the challenge league. Like I've not noticed a lot of attention there to the comics that are posted in there, and I think making the challenge league or adjusting it to become something that's much more appealing to an independent creator, to where they want to go and post their comics on Webtoons because that's the best place to post your comics. You got the best features, you've got the best control over your comic and your blogs and all this stuff, and you can have everything there and make it a destination that cartoonists want to go there. Just like whether they get paid or not, that's the spot. That's the place to be. And I think that's kind of what Steven's sort of driving.
That does make sense. Because when I step back and I think, why would I post anything into a challenge league? There's not really any reason why I would want to. Because I have my own site. I have my own blog. I put it out there. I have my fans come to it. I have Kickstarters. I have Patreon. And so if they wouldn't have approached me, I would have never considered going to Webtoons, and it would be hard for me to consider it. It's hard for me to see why someone would try it, if they're in the least bit established, So that makes sense to me. That makes a lot of sense. If they could just beef that up to where it's not all these people who aren't paid aren't so hidden, then like one thing that I found problematic was a web address for Cithra. It's just really a hard web address. Like, so I'm like what I'm gonna do is just assign Cithra.com to point to my web comic, and so it's little things like that kind of make the system not as attractive. And I want it to be attractive for people, and I want the system to really get built up, and I want a lot of people to join it.
Well, and I suspect, and I just having talked to them, they know a lot of this stuff, and I believe they're going to address a lot of these issues in the coming year. I don't have specifics on anything of that, and they haven't announced any of that. But they're aware of a lot of this, and I'm pretty certain they're going to make some changes moving forward to improve upon that. Because for them, this is all very new to them as well, because they're coming from a country where comics flow in the streets like milk and honey, and you're coming here and it's a very different culture doesn't embrace comics the way Korea does. So you kind of have to change things. So. I think they're kind of learning as they go as well, and this is still in its infancy. So, I'm very optimistic about where it's going.
Yeah, and it's amazing that it's only been a year, right?
Yeah,
like they're doing amazing for being that young. So I'm not complaining. I'm hopeful that all these things can be addressed, because if there was a YouTube of webcomics, I think that would be awesome. And I just talked to some friends of mine here the other day, and it seems to me like that has to be the future of webcomics, is just having a bunch of like really awesome they're like syndicates, but they're these websites like Webtoons and something else that is actually that everyone is fighting to just put their comics on, because it's just such a great platform, great features, and you can actually get paid for it and all that stuff. That seems to make sense for the future of it to me.
It's one of those things where I actually think one of the biggest hurdles is going to become for at least for American creators, is sort of the acceptance that you've got to learn to produce at a much higher volume than you've ever been used to producing. So like, I've had plenty of people ask me about, I want to post my thing up in Challenge League, and how am I going to ever, like they're really hopeful that they'll be able to do it, but it's like, can you produce? Because of what I understand, I think it's like a 25 panel
per
update, and it's like, well, can you produce that on a weekly basis? And if you can't, it's like we've almost got to break the parity. We have to, to basically really be able to, I think, achieve the success you'd like on there, you have to be willing to produce at a much higher rate than you're maybe used to producing already. I had always set really stringent deadlines for myself anyway, and I'd gotten used to working a full-time job and still cranking out 3 or 4 pages a week. And so I built that up, but for a lot of people that's a big challenge, because it's just the way our webcomics work. It's like if you put a page up every week for a year and you put a page up, you're considered really producing, because you're never missing your deadlines. And here it's like, oh, I didn't do 5 pages this week. Well, that wasn't enough, So that's, I think, going to be a big challenge too with creators is, can they do that? Can we keep up with that pacing when we've not been used to producing?
But let me ask you, do you think that, it seems to me like that's a common thing in like Korea and Japan and, this massive amount of content. Do you think they're trying to impose that on American creators, and that will ever stick? Because it seems like we just make things at a slower pace here.
I think
it will if you're a featured artist.
I think the tricky thing is getting the business part of it to work, because like we got to remember that like the top creators in Korea get paid $30,000 a month, and if you were to,
A lot
if
of
that
money.
kind of money was on the table, people would be like, why, yes, I will do 500, I will do 25 pages a week. Like, I will figure it out and I will work my butt off. And just to get a chance at making that kind of money. And so it's not just that, like, we're slow or something.
Right.
I think we're all human, and it's just we don't have a very big comics market here, and I think that's one of the reasons why no one's hustling to get into comics is because like there's just not a lot of money.
It doesn't take too much work to be successful. Like if you make a book, you're instantly in like the top 10% of comic creators because you've made something.
Yeah.
In America.
Armchair cartoonists in America where it's like, yeah, I drew a comic once.
Yeah, and what you're saying is fair. It's not so much, I think, a culture that desires to be slow. It's just we're products of our environment in a lot of way, and
Well,
just
I
what
guess
the realities
I'm
of
just
our
speaking
market
for
is,
myself because
you
like the comics I'm attracted to are not stuff that's just churned out. Like I just won't buy it because it doesn't appeal to me, and I'm more into the European comics, the ones that take a year to do a 60-page graphic novel or whatever, and the stuff I'm working on is like I'm really trying to make it true to that style that I would actually want to pick up, and for me to say, okay, I'll just throw that all away because I want to do speed so I can get paid a lot of money. Like I might as well just go get a freelance job and do what someone else is telling me to do in that case, and so that's my struggle with it, because I'm fighting to even hit 20 panels a weekly update, but it's because a lot of my spreads are like full double page spreads of like it takes me a long time to get the spread just right, and it flies by on Webtoons in like a flick of the finger.
Well, you almost like it makes me think about like if I was gonna create a comic specifically for Webtoons, it's like how would I approach this differently? Because we're so accustomed to making books and to making something that has to be printed and that fits a certain format. It's like, if you approach it knowing it's going to be a Webtoons comic, it's like, okay, well, let me produce this in a way that I won't kill myself and that I won't waste energy on a panel that will only last a second, but take me hours. And so I think it's learning that. And I'm trying to now develop Newman with that thought in mind that it's most important how it appears on the platform. But I still create it, in the square format that I've been doing so that I can print them all up later on. But, eventually those printed books might not really matter anymore. Eventually there might be enough money in the digital side that, I don't care if I ever print this or not. And it's weird to think that way, but,
well, see,
we might be
it's
moving
hard
that
for me
direction.
to embrace that because I get paychecks every month from all the printed stuff I do, but I only get paychecks digitally when I'm producing like crazy, So
Right.
I'm trying to set this up so this is my retirement through passive income, not this is my retirement in working 90 hours a week until I die. You know what I'm saying? So, and I know, I'm just kind of starting to get into that mindset in the last 5 years because I said this on the last episode. I'm 40 now, and so now I'm starting to think, okay, what's this long-term strategy? I mean, really, I can't keep cranking stuff out, when I'm 60 at the same speed I did when I was 30.
I think about that a lot too. I think especially when I look at the printed editions of my books, I'm so grateful that Webtoons allows me to go, okay, I can just focus on making a good book and I'm going to get paid to make it. But I do think about selling just 1,000 copies, the minimal print run that I did through Kickstarter for Adamsville. If I do that, great, that's a good success. That's pretty cool. But to me, it's I want to be in my 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th printings of it down. I still want to be promoting it long after I'm done with it, if I stay independent, if no one ever comes along and takes it from me. But But I'm with you. Like I don't. I'm like, if it just stops making me money once it's done, then man, I don't think I tried as hard as I should have. Because I mean, 1,000 people is like not anywhere near the audience it could capture. You know. And so it's like I'm thinking about it that way very much too.
I am a bit. There's an interesting dichotomy that I've always wrestled with, which is that the story of a comic keeps people reading and makes it worthwhile, but the art of a comic gets people to actually pick it up in the first place. And I've always been the type of person that's like, well, just go for the story because the story is really what matters. But I am concerned sometimes that, like, if I don't have something that looks like, you know, a French European comic, people aren't going to pick it up.
Well, your book's gorgeous, Stephen, so you're all right.
Thanks. I think I've solved some of those problems, but
You've definitely created this really fast but good-looking style for your webtoons.
I want to just
for sure
really just point out the amazing storytelling freedom of the webtoons format. Like once the problem of how do I crank out, like just physically, how do I make the art that's required? I've like experienced more enjoyment and like just storytelling freedom than I ever thought would be possible. The story I'm working on is just so much more massive than I never realized how. Like I started out doing comics, doing newspaper strip comics, and you know how compressed and tight that writing is. And then jumping to a graphic novel was like, dang, I have so much space to do stuff. But now I'm kind of like, wow, like an infinite canvas. I have so much time to really get into the lives of the characters, and for me, like it's a really neat experience. It's almost more like a journal where I'm just recording these characters' lives. And I'll look back and I'll be like, oh, that's what they were doing that day. I can't believe they hadn't known about that at that point. And like, it's becoming really intricate. It's almost like the characters are alive because because something new happens every week. And for me, I think that the storytelling potential is really exciting. It has the potential to create stories that are just enormous, because there's no physical constrictions.
That excites me too. Like the book I'm considering proposing to Webtoons after Adamsville. I'm excited about it because I feel like I will have the space to tell the story the way I always wanted to. So yeah, I'm excited to potentially try what you're talking about.
That's interesting. See, I don't know if I could give up like planning it as a comic first and then converting it, but I know that's doing it that way would just change the whole thing for me.
Yeah.
If I were to just say it's all about the Webtoons scrolling format, like let's just focus on that only, and then we can worry about converting.
Well,
it to
I work in
second.
pages first. I work in pages first and then convert.
Really? But you think about the updates as updates. Like you're not. Yeah. You like like that's the struggle I'm having now. Is like I'm about to start writing my third book, but I've been writing the first two books as books, and so I'm arcing them a certain way, and I wasn't thinking about like how many panels per update, and now I'm like, well, wait, I need to be thinking about if I draw 10 pages and it takes 10 pages for that update, well, that's 10 pages of this book that's going into one update, as opposed to like, well, could I have broken that up better? Could I have written that differently? And so that the content was more efficient. So so the fact that your primary focus is just how do I make it for this platform, I think makes you make a lot of different decisions than you would have made had it been thought about differently.
I think
I could be wrong.
Yeah, no, it's true. A big difference that's affected me just on a practical level. I remember hearing this Japanese editor, his take on manga was that like it just has to be interesting, which is really, really simple, but and I had some friends who were like, I feel like I remember talking to someone about that. And they're like, no, it has to be other stuff. But when you think of it in terms of a syndicated work that comes out weekly, all you have to do is keep the reader reading. And that's an entirely different mindset than creating a graphic novel. Because when you have a graphic novel in your hands, you're like, I know that if I'm reading the beginning, it's probably going to be a lot of setup, and then there's going to be a big event, and then they're going to ask a question, which they're going to answer by the end. But for me, the story that I'm telling, I do have a lot of big events that happen, but I am more concerned with keeping the audience reading to the next episode than having a perfect climax that fits in a book. So I'm asking questions like, how can I create mystery? How can I ask questions that the audience will want to find out what happens? And also, how can I make just the mere act of reading enjoyable rather than trying to get to the end of the book, just reading within the book? How can I make that enjoyable? And so I've been focusing a lot on like how characters perceive things. Like my main character perceives people as flavors, and how the world has changed, how technology that we have is kind of interesting and baffling. There's like always something new, all the permutations of that. So like just looking at something in a bunch of different perspectives. And I've been kind of focusing on that line of thought. I think I had a realization when I was listening to, it's kind of like if you have a really interesting narrator's voice, it almost doesn't matter what they're talking about as long as it's like, who's that guy on Prairie Home Companion?
NPR voice?
No, what's his name? Garrison Keillor has that, like, you could talk about paint drying on a wall and you'd find it kind of like, wow, that's really profound, just because the way his voice, the way he talks about it. And that's, for me, that's a really big deal. It's like, wow, even if I'm going through some boring setup, if I can talk about it in a way that's interesting, that the audience finds compelling, then it doesn't matter. Nothing happened during that episode. I've kept them reading, I kept them entertained, and they'll come back next week. So it is a different mindset from a storytelling perspective, as well as just like how you're, like what you're drawing and making.
That's interesting. But you said you plan them in pages first, and then you convert it. So you still are planning for that book ultimately,
yeah,
right?
What gets me a little concerned is that I'm using a big font so that you can read it on an iPhone.
Oh yeah.
Which means that my pages like usually only have 3, sometimes 2 panels, 3 or 4 panels on them. And the speech bubbles, like I do really compact writing, so a lot is happening per page, but the speech bubbles are really big, and it's not made for, like, if I was making it for a paper graphic novel, I would have a lot more panel per page ratio, a higher one, just because that's a way more efficient use of paper. And that's what has me a little bit concerned, because it's hyper decompressed comics. There's like, I have so many moment to moment transitions, and like so many just moments of just like staring into the sky, and like the pacing element stuff, which I feel like is vital, but again, is not like the best use of paper.
It was funny, like towards the end of my book, it was in creating it, I started to realize how ballooned it was getting, like how big it was starting to get. And I had to start thinking, well, is there a way I can add more panels per page? Like having almost the opposite, like the reaction of going, well, that'll be good for Webtoons, but it's also informing like what my production schedule will be like on book 3, because I am starting to think like, okay, well, I know where I can realistically produce this many pages per week. And so how many panels do I need to put in that many pages so that I actually equate that to an update on Webtoons? And so it's like having this double thought of like, okay, I think if I do 6 pages, I could do this many panels and that would be enough. But I'm like a really big fan of storytelling that takes its time. Like I love Naoki Urasawa's stuff, and he'll spend a page just showing a character reacting, But I know that that's a really hard thing to try to do with the kind of comics we're making.
Yeah, like if we were making black and white comics, like print all
purist
comics.
I
think that's
No, but he's right though, because if you're gonna, especially how much more expensive it is to print a color book, and then you spend a page just showing a character reacting. You know what I mean?
Oh man, I waste money on paper on just nothing happening in every one of my stories.
It's so important though.
I mean, my last book, the printer, everyone down the line was like emailing me, is this page supposed to be blank? I'm like, yes, it's a blank page. And then the printer emails me, is this page supposed to be blank? You've missed the paper, the artwork. No, it's supposed to be blank.
Dude, I have pages.
That's funny.
quote unquote pages in this book that's just like it's a blank page with like a word, just like a word on it, like written, just to like just like
See, that's awesome. I think that
character's thought or something like that. Yeah.
Have you thought about Coffee Table Comics publishing your book, Stephen?
I don't know. I don't know if you can afford the paper.
All right, guys, that's the end of this part. This is part 1. I'll edit together part 2 and post it hopefully in a week or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. Thanks for listening, and please share this with everyone you can. Please go to iTunes and rate it if you like it. It's also on Stitcher. I know that's a popular way people listen to podcasts now. And if you guys want to support the show, you can always go and buy any of my books on Amazon. Just type in Remind Jason Brubaker, and you'll find Remind or Sithra Jason Brubaker, or Unnatural Talent by Jason Brubaker if you want a book on creating how to do this stuff that I'm doing. You can also get Unnatural Talent on Audible. You can also go to gumroad.com/Jason Brubaker, and I got a bunch of digital products. I got my audiobook, and it's like fonts that I've created that I use in my comics, or some textures I use in my comics. I don't know. All this stuff is out there. And that's the best way to support me and support this show. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.
Hey everyone, Adam Greenfield here, host of the Making Comics Gutter Talk podcast. Now I know you're a fan of Jason Brubaker and his work because you're hearing my voice on his podcast. And because of this, if you're not familiar with us, I have a sneaky suspicion you dig Gutter Talk too. So check us out twice a month on Fridays as we check in with comic creators of all levels and backgrounds to discuss the technical and personal about being a comic creator. Gutter Talk alumni include Stephen Bissett, Mark Wade, Lucy Bellwood, Dean Haspiel, Paolo Rivera, and many, many more. And that's not even counting the live Gutter Talk panels at Comic-Con and WonderCon. So head on over to iTunes or whatever podcast subscription tool you use and subscribe to Making Comics Gutter Talk. And be good to people, people.